Kristen Wilson. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to meet with us and connect with us. We really do appreciate and honor your time. I want to explain a little bit about Newport Healthcare, and then I'm going to introduce Ryan Fedoroff. So Newport Healthcare is a family of evidence-based healing centers for teens and young adults who struggle with mental health issues. We believe in creating sustainable healing through identifying and addressing underlying trauma, mental health, and attachment wounds. We have been around for 11 years. We've been outcome studied. We offer clinically sophisticated programming, and we truly believe that as authentic, positive connections start to emerge, healing begins, and old maladaptive behaviors are no longer needed. Fear is truly replaced with love, and disconnection is worked into connection. And the power of connection has really never been more important than it is now. We want to thank you for attending our Second Parent University, Homeschooling, a toolbox and strategies for supporting teens with learning differences. As both a clinician and a parent of a teenage daughter with a visual processing disorder, dyslexia, and ADHD, I understand firsthand the need for these strategies to engage our kids in the online learning formats that are being used during this crisis, as well as the need to advocate as a parent for IEP accommodations to be met even outside of school. I want to introduce Ryan Fedoroff, our National Director of Education. Ryan brings over a decade of academic leadership and classroom experience to her role here at Newport Healthcare. As an educator, she's passionate about working with high-risk adolescents and is trained in restorative practices. Ryan works alongside clinicians to create interventions to assist students dealing with anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues in the classroom. She also collaborates with special education teams to create protocols for managing classroom challenges for students dealing with auditory processing and executive functioning deficits. Ryan, take it away.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been with Newport Academy or Newport Healthcare for now 6 years almost. And my focus has been really adapting the classroom to meet the needs of each individual child. And it definitely is a challenge. We see clients in our classrooms who struggle from various different learning differences, attention issues, etc. And it's really a challenge to constantly being able to individualize, but it's definitely possible. I first want to acknowledge how challenging this time has been. I mean, we're really being asked to do an impossible task, and myself included. I am working full-time from home while managing 2 little kids, a 1st grader and a 5th grader, in home distance learning. So what I'm going to do in this presentation here is I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going through. I'm going to review just sort of like just basic distance learning, work from home strategies, and then I'm going to go into some different strategies to focus on with kids with learning differences. I know this can be an especially challenging time for kids that have attention issues and are, struggling with a multitude of different things. So we'll get into that after we kind of cover some basics. First of all, I think this experience has been actually really, I would say overall, I'm seeing this experience in a really positive way. I'm really trying to focus on the positive because at times you can get really bogged down in all of the different tasks we have in the day, especially for us that also are working. And just in general, it's not really natural for us to be the full-time authoritarian figures on our kids around their learning. And I think that can be very, very difficult for us. So I just want to acknowledge all of you out there that are doing this at home, that are struggling to keep your kids engaged, to keep them focused, and really just trying to focus right now on all of the different things that are positive. For me, it's really been about creating a lot more stronger connections at home within the family unit. And for me, it's also been a reminder of how slowing down and taking time for ourselves. We're not running the kids around from activity to activity. We're not, we don't have all of the different expectations, the social functions, all of that. So that's been really, really nice for us as a family. Right now, we are basically being asked to work, parent, manage school tasks, and honestly, at the end of the day, stay sane. Because at this point, I know as we're entering our 4th and 5th and 6th weeks of distance learning, it's feeling incredibly overwhelming sometimes. And I've found that there are really, really good days and there are just really, really bad days. So I want to acknowledge all of you for going through that. And I just want to make sure that we're all taking care of ourselves and our kids' mental health and wellness, because that's where this can get really overwhelming. I think the idea that we, putting the pressure on them, understanding that this isn't normal for them, they're missing their daily touch points. It doesn't, and most of our kids, and I'm going to focus on middle school and high school, but this doesn't mean you can't apply this also to elementary school aged kids. So I want to be really acknowledge the fact that I'm focusing more on the older grades, but this is applicable at all levels. I think the thing we need to acknowledge is many of our middle school and high school students are capable of doing this on their own, but we still need to create the time, the space, and the structure for the kids. So to get the work completed, to feel positive about what they're doing. And I think that parents really need to work right now on building self-esteem in their kids. I heard my child say something today. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's something that was like, I'm terrible, I'm awful. And it was because, he was really struggling with a specific assignment. And I heard him saying that. And so these are the times where we can really individualize the attention that we're giving them and really ensure that we're helping to build their self-esteem, their autonomy, and helping them to feel good about themselves as learners. I want to start by talking about the different types of learning that we're seeing right now, because I want to acknowledge also that we're all having a different experience. First is we have asynchronous learning, which is really developed for equity purposes. And that's where students are just getting packets of work weekly. And they're expected to turn it in at the end of the day or the end of the week, or maybe they aren't expected to turn it in at all, which also causes its own issues, right? If the kids know it's not due back to the teacher, are they less likely to do it and engage with the work? Second is synchronous learning, which is really like full-time Zoom sessions. We're seeing this in a lot of private schools where kids are being asked to basically sit on Zoom calls all day. And then at the end of the day, they actually have assignments to complete. This will include classwork and homework. They're trying to maintain the same experience for the kids, and it can be very overwhelming. And last is more of a blended learning program. And this is what I'm seeing in my own home. And this is what most of the schools are doing. This is a combination of a Zoom session, maybe once a day or a couple of times a week, coupled with various assignments. And teachers are really trying to access every amazing, educational website out there. And there's definitely some really good ones. And so many of them are making their services free right now to families. Things that we have to do in terms of, just kind of the overarching goals of distance learning. The first thing is, for those of us that have kids that are going on next year to the next level, the next grade level, we need to know what are those essential skills that they need to know. I think that's the most important thing. And I had been asking my teachers to send this for a couple of weeks. I was like, can you just send me a list of the things that you are going to cover at the end of the year? I don't even care about social studies or science, because those courses repeat themselves throughout middle school and high school. But what I really want to know is reading, writing, and math. What are the things that they really need to know in order to be successful next year? Those are my priorities. And I'm going to say this a couple times during this. Prioritize and minimize. That is our goal. So the things that are priorities to me are reading, writing, and math. So essentially, I would ask the teachers to provide you with just some quick bullet points. Just send me a list of the different topics you were going to cover. You can always look up the district standards on the website, but it's hard to know, what did my kid already do? What are they going to do? They're not in any specific order, so that can be more challenging. So really asking the teachers to provide that to you can be really supportive in helping you figure out, how can I kind of accommodate and modify? Figure out who are the people in your family that can help your child besides you. So sometimes the power struggle is between the parent and the child, and the child's more likely to accept the help and the feedback from someone outside of the immediate family system. And by the way, when you're spending a lot of time together, and also we ourselves are feeling really overwhelmed and stressed, who are some of those outside people in your lives that are really good influences and can help your child to feel really positive, maybe to set goals for the day or the week, or just to have a Zoom chat about what's going on in school. How can I support you? Maybe you have someone that's really good at math in your family and they can do some online math tutoring. Providing those touch points can be really, really valuable for the child because it's really what they're missing right now. And they might not even be able to identify it. Also, think about what resilience looks like for your family. I know that obviously for most of us, we're getting to see how resilient our kids really are. You know, I have one that's handled this no problem. Every disappointment, everything, she's handled it with ease and felt really good about it. And then I have another one who's really struggling, who's just really having a hard time and feeling overwhelmed. And so I know I can look at that kid and go, I really need to work on this right now. I need to figure out what resilience is going to look like for him. We have to have self-compassion too right now. I mean, I think we can't do it all. And, you know, the other day I took, you know, my son gets a very detailed schedule, which I actually can show you right now, which outlines everything he's supposed to do. And the other day I just, all the extra, the art, the Spanish, the PE, the additional, I just cut it right off and was like, we don't need to worry about this right now. So really doing things like that, feeling compassion for your kids in the struggle and just knowing when they're hitting that wall and shutting down for the day. Another thing is just ensuring that things are organized, both computers and learning space. For kids with learning differences, I think it's really important that they're in an area, it's kind of a fine balance, an area where it's quiet, there's not a lot of distractions, but where you can also monitor them. And I know that can be difficult, and our go-to is often their bedrooms, which can be fine. But it's really, to me, it's great if you can, you know, just walk by the door and be able to see their computer screen and see the child and see what they're doing. And just doing a couple check-ins when you have time. I often like to use the living room. We obviously you can see my house here behind me. We kind of have this whole open space here where all the kids are working. I'm generally working. And it can be very distracting. So I've got to know when the distractions are too much and when do my children need to find an alternative space. Also organizing desktops, because there's a lot of distractions. Before I got on this, I had to, you know, close out my email, close out my text messages. I wanted to make sure that I could give you my full attention without feeling distracted by, you know, all the different things that are the notifications popping up on my computer. So ensuring that, you know, that the desktops are all organized in a way and that we're minimizing distractions. One of the suggestions, if you have a kid who's really struggling every day, they're on their computer and then all of a sudden they're jumping on Instagram or they're jumping on, you know, TikTok or some other website, you can create web blockers. So you have one that's a school login screen and one that's just a regular login screen. And that gives you the ability to say, hey, you know, to the kid is here's the opportunity for you to help, you know, ensure focus and engagement and limit distractions. So why don't we create this space for you? Why don't we do this? And then you can kind of limit their access to social media, et cetera, during the day. The other thing that I've found really important to do is also putting everything away at the end of the day, even not even just on the weekends, but just cleaning up at the end of the day. If, you know, we end school at 3 o'clock, making sure that all the school stuff gets organized and put away for the day, because I need separation between the two. I need separation between school time and, you know, personal time here. And I do the same thing. I work from home most of the time. I travel. And so I'm often creating space for, I work, and then at the end of the night, I shut it down and kind of put it away so it's not taking up space, because then I'm constantly thinking about all the different things I have to do. The other thing is figuring out something that your teen really wants to do right now. Like, what's something they want to learn or get better at? You know, I know for my child, it's been skateboarding. It's been something he's been really passionate about, and every day that's all he wants to do. So we're trying to find value in other things, because right now it's really easy for us to just focus on all of the tasks we have to get done during the day and all of the management and managing the 50 million different Zoom calls, my Zoom calls, their Zoom calls. So how can we find value in the day that has absolutely nothing to do with school or work, something they feel really good about? The next thing is, I think one of the things we get caught up in doing is trying to recreate an entire school day. And high school and middle school kids really have the ability to do about 3 to 4 hours max of learning a day. And if you look at their school day, maybe it runs from 8 to 3, but out of that 6 hours a day, they have passing periods, they have breaks, they have lunchtime. So they're really only doing 3 to 4 hours of learning a day. So to think that they're going to sit down from 8 to 3 and just work back to back to back is really, it's just really overwhelming for them. So just to remember that as they're creating their schedules and thinking about what they have to do in the day. I think the other piece of it is building breaks into the day. So making sure that there's space for lunch, movement, whatever that looks like, PE, yoga, is it walking? Is it taking a bike ride? And then ensuring, is it jumping on a trampoline? That's something to do with kids. Whatever it is, just getting them physical activity during the day, getting them up and walking around and away from the screen. I think that creating opportunities too for those individual touch points for the kids. So the kids are really missing, teens included, those individual touch points during the day. The kids they sit next to in class, their teachers, maybe it's the assistant principal they really like, or even the people at the security on campus that they kind of mess around with. They're missing that social connection. So thinking about and encouraging your teens to find ways to have some of those continued touch points. So, and sometimes it takes us as parents maybe intervening, and maybe we reach out to their favorite teacher and say, Johnny is really struggling this week. I don't know what's going on, but do you think you could reach out and just set up a meeting with him and kind of do some digging, see what there is going on, and see how I could support him better. So it's okay for us to do that. We're not expected to be mind readers, and the kids themselves are really struggling to identify some of the feelings. And I think us as parents can relate. Sometimes we just feel a ball full of stress, and it's like, there's nothing different about today. It's just, there's something going on, some energy in the room, and sometimes we can't identify it. And remember, we're creating a partnership here. It's us, it's the teachers, it's the students. I think as we think about our schedules and what we're doing during the day, I want to say this again, we're going to minimize and prioritize. So many of the schools have gone to a credit, no credit system, or what's called a universal pass system. So credit, no credit is they're just going to credit, no credit. If you turn in work and you show up, you're going to get credit. Universal pass system means that if you show up for this, what we're considering the last quarter of school, if you show up to your Zoom sessions, if you're turning in some work, if you're showing some effort, you're going to get an A, and they're going to average that with the grade you had at the end of the third quarter. So it gives an opportunity for a lot of people to improve their grades. And then it also is basically rewarding people for showing up. It's trying to maintain that engagement. So like I said, minimizing and prioritizing is really important. There's obviously so much flexibility here. So emailing the teachers or supporting the child in emailing the teachers and saying, I'm really struggling with the workload. There are a lot of parents out there that are emailing schools and they want more and more work. Whereas I'm saying, just pare it down to the bare minimum. What is the least amount of stuff that I need to cover? Again, find out what is essential. And then when you're looking at your schedule right now, I know many of you already have these schedules up and created. Do you have time in the day for them to move around? What does your school time look like? Again, school time should only be 3 to 4 hours. And then what's their downtime going to look like? And I'm going to talk about technology and screens a little bit later because I think it's really, or coming up here shortly, I think it's really important for us to think about is to let go of a lot of the things. I'm telling everybody that my parenting rule book has gone out the door. Everything that I believed in, being a low-tech family, all of this has sort of had to go out the door for this experience so that my children could maintain those individual touch points. I always like to think about starting every day with like a brain dump. So if your child right now is struggling with organizing all of their assignments, their materials, figuring out what they need to do for the day, I suggest doing, what are the must-dos for today? What are the want to do? So the things, if I have time, and what are the things that aren't time sensitive? Maybe there's some more long-term projects. I know that there are a lot of teachers that are doing some long-term projects. And I know we have AP tests coming up. So any kids that are doing AP tests are kind of gearing up for those, even though obviously they're going to be a little bit easier than they have been in the past and more accessible probably for some kids. I always think about also suggesting, and this is for kids with learning differences, kids without learning differences, is what's a planner or a checklist for them. I know that, this right here, what I showed you earlier, this schedule here is really helpful. It's color coded by subject. It starts with providing any links he needs to activities. And then it says, what's the follow-up and what's the final culminating activity. So it helps him be able to cross out what he needs to do for the day. I think helping the kids to create that. Our kids are, executive function skills we're not born with good ones. We have to teach those executive function skills, and we have to give them some of these tools. And schools are not focused on teaching those organization tools. It's really up to us parents. So this is an opportunity for us to go, what is my kid really, really good at? And where does my kid need some help? That's one of the benefits of this is I feel like we're getting a really good gauge and assessment of who our kids are as learners and what they're really capable of doing. Remember that some kids, and I'm going to, again, get into this a little bit later, but some kids really can only focus for short spurts of time. So if you notice that every 20 minutes or so, your child's getting up and walking around the room and struggling to, that's being distracted. And they're going to say a million reasons. They got to go to the bathroom. They need water. They need to get a snack. They need to do this. So really setting them up for success, knowing, I notice at 20 minutes, you always get up and walk around. So why don't we just try and do like 20 minutes of work, solid work, and a 5-minute break? And then it kind of balances it out, and it doesn't make them feel bad. It just holds them more tasked to that time. One of the things that I've really had to let go of during this time, and this is really, a lot of this comes from personal experience, is screen time. Don't count the minutes. There is so much screen time going on in the house all the time right now. I feel this is between the Zoom calls and the video lessons and submitting work is just incredibly overwhelming. So I would tell you right now, do not count the minutes. Technology is not created equal. And I love this because Common Sense Media really pushes this idea of production versus consumption. And the idea is, when am I actually using technology to produce something versus when am I using technology for just consumption? So an example would be using iMovie to create a movie to submit to your teacher about Earth Day. That's production. Consumption is scrolling through Instagram endlessly and just having mindless time. So really first separating out what that looks like. Every time they use a screen for school, let's just assume that's production, and that's okay. They can do that as much as they need to. And then we look at consumption. I have definitely laxed my rules on social media, not on social media, but on media, on TV, on video games, which we didn't have before, and now we have. I was scared. I did not want to introduce that into my house, but I also recognized that I needed incentives. My kids needed some external motivation. There was no way I was going to make it through this without some external motivation. And it's actually been fine. I mean, they've used it and were kind of into it for the first week or two, and now they're barely on it at all because, again, My son found something that he was passionate about. He found his value in this, which is the skateboarding. And I think for all of our kids, if they find some value in this time, something new they can do, something they can create, something they can learn, I really think that helps them to feel a lot more positive about what we're experiencing right now. Don't feel guilty. We are going through a massive cultural shock. So when it comes to technology use, you've got to work. They need to be entertained sometimes. And that might be what we're going towards, is just using a little bit more screens. It's temporary. We will get back to some normalcy. Again, not all screens are created equal. So knowing that, using that idea of production versus consumption. For production, you can be on there all the time. For consumption, maybe you want to limit it to an hour or two a day. That's fine. But don't feel guilty if you've got that extra meeting and you need the kids to be entertained and that's just what you have right now. Especially with weather. I know in Connecticut last week, it was hailing. In California, we definitely I are having some very nice weather right now, but it's different for everyone. So doing what you can. Using technology to bond, I think, is also really important right now. If you do introduce something like, if you are giving them a little bit more time to play video games than you normally would, or whatever that looks like, do it with them. Have that experience with them. Use that to bond. Use it to bond with them. Use it to help them bond with their peers. I know with boys, talking on the phone or FaceTiming isn't necessarily natural. It's difficult. So I know that there's a lot of teens that are really still connecting with their peers, a lot of teen boys through like the Xbox and the talking to each other. And that's something that I was vehemently against before this happened. But now I recognize that, for them right now, that's maintaining some social connection, and that's okay. We can talk about it and have conversations. So anything that you're struggling with, your kids, if we're talking about middle school and high school, there is some ability here to process what's happening. And, look, I'm very open about, we've kind of laxed the rules in our house right now, but this isn't always how it's going to be. But this is where we're at right now. And this is what we need. It's always important still to maintain balance with technology use. So for you, I would say carving out that screen-free time. We do, family movie night every single night. But we carve out time right around dinner and dinner time where we go on a walk and we have dinner with no screens. And that just helps us to just make sure that we're maintaining sort of that family connection. Because I think right now the value in this time is how much we can connect as a family without outside stress. I was talking to a mom friend of mine the other day, and she said she owns her own business in San Francisco. And she said, I'm not normally home this much. She goes, it's been so great for my kids because I'm normally, they're normally with their au pair and I'm not here. And so I feel like there's really this opportunity where we are working, but we also are all in a very tenuous situation. So people are being understanding, and we have these opportunities now to really connect with our family. Things I would keep in mind around technology use, particularly with kids with learning differences, is not allowing them to FaceTime while doing schoolwork. I mean, if they're calling their lab partner or their partner in math to do a math assignment, that could be one thing. But really being mindful of just not letting them be on FaceTime endlessly for hours with their friends doing assignments, because what should take 20 minutes is now going to take an hour. I always suggest to turn off notifications, put on Do Not Disturb. So I did that just now for the presentation, creating that space to just focus on what you need to get done, because all of those different distractions are going to, makes, again, something that takes 20 minutes take an hour. I also am big proponent of the different screens. So creating the workspace for the two different screens, the school login versus the social login. And that helps us to kind of separate out and really maintain the focus. I want to talk specifically now about just students with learning differences. And I know, we'll send out some information to you, and it'll be about 2 pages, and it'll provide bullet points of all of this that I'm talking about. So don't feel rushed. to write it down. Just know that we will send that to you afterward. So the US Department of Education announced that it was giving schools flexibility on interpreting the Individuals with Disabilities Act, saying that complying with the law should not prevent any school from offering educational programs through distance instruction. So basically what's supposed to be happening is everyone with an IEP has goals that they're supposed to achieve, and they're monitored right every single year. And now what's happening is they're saying, look, special education teachers take those goals, create a learning plan that aligns with the goals, and then kind of transition. Hopefully, most of them are transitioning more into sort of a coaching role with the parents. So supporting the student and the family in creating an at-home learning plan that will work best for that student. So here's the thing, is that if something isn't working, and by the way, something can work for a week and then totally bomb the next week. And then we know we have to kind of revisit and adjust, like what can we change? What didn't work last week? Collaborating with the student too on this. So talking to them like, we're not having a great week here. So what do you think we could do to change that? What do you think? Last week was great. What was really great about that work? What worked well for you? And what's not working well? Anyone in about 7th through 12th grade is going to have some insight here. They're going to have some understanding of what might be going on. So now what special education teachers are supposed to be doing is prioritizing the work with families and then creating learning targets that translate into manageable benchmarks. So they're supposed to be taking those goals and being realistic about what it is that you can actually do at home, what's going to be manageable. Schools have greater flexibility right now in meeting the IEP objectives. So this is, again, where I go back to prioritize and minimize. What is the most important thing for your children to learn? I always focus on English and math. Those are the two most important areas. I think it's the reading, the writing, and doing math. Math is so foundational. So if they're in geometry and at the end of the year they're doing volumes of solids, they're going to need that again in pre-calculus. So it's how are we going to make sure that they're getting the essential skills that they're going to see again down the road. Writing is something they're building upon every year and improving upon. And reading, of course, is always, for our kids that have challenges with reading comprehension, it's always so important that they're practicing those skills. I would say that as parents, we need to be seeking continual guidance. And I think that one of the things I'm finding is that special education has actually been one of the lagging things to get initiated at the school. So many kids with IEPs, the special education teams, those were like the slowest to get started. And to me, they were almost the most important. So kids that had reading specialists and math specialists, they were lagging behind on getting times created to meet with kids. And I'm not really sure where the disconnect happened, but I know that the schools felt like they had to meet the needs of the greater population before they could think about those kids. And it was really hard because some of those kids, the kids in the learning difference population, had soft starts with the distance learning program. I think parents right now, we need continual guidance from the special education team. We need them checking in with us regularly. So creating opportunities. How can I have a weekly or a bi-weekly check-in with my child's special education teacher or case manager? This generally oftentimes is a really person that the student feels very close to. So ensuring there's opportunities weekly for them to have touch points. And maybe the special education teacher can help you set up a plan at home that's going to work for your child. I want to talk about the kids that just struggle with focus, because our kids with learning differences struggle with focus most of the time. Kids with dyslexia, auditory processing, visual processing disorder, ADHD, focus is a huge issue for them. So I want to kind of focus in on that, because I think at home, that's probably one of the things that we're seeing the most is, how do I keep them focused? I want to talk a little bit, these kids often have so many positive attributes. And I have to tell you, in a traditional school setting, the positive attributes don't get focused on enough. I think we get really focused on keeping them engaged and on task, and we don't spend enough time building their self-esteem. Kids that have ADHD or other, learning differences often actually have the ability to multitask. It looks like distractibility and it looks like very chaotic to some people, but they can really think outside the box. They are creative and they are spontaneous. And that's part of the flip side. That's how you spin the impulsivity, is they're willing to do something and try something or do something kind of out of character, out of the blue, and that's okay. Can be highly empathetic. They can, and they can work really well with people. So how can we capture that right now in this time? They're intuitive, they have high energy, they're original, and they really do have something that defies description. So I really want us to think about those positive things. It's very hard when they're struggling with focus and engagement, and we're meant to manage these kids. Is the ability to sit quietly in your learning area and do the same work at the same amount of time as everyone else really our highest goal and measure of human development? And that's something that I bring to parents all the time, is we are not all created the same, and that's okay. We're all individuals. So what takes, one child 10 minutes might take another child 30 or 40 minutes. And that's okay. It's not a race, but often these kids feel that pressure in the school environment. So this is the time where we can really focus on kind of improving those executive function skills, looking at their time management, their organization, their impulsivity. How can we support them? And I think what happens, again, in the schools is they feel less than because they're comparing themselves to their peers. And right now, they don't have anyone to compare themselves to. Maybe a sibling, and that definitely happens, but really they don't. So this can be really positive. And remember, the messages that these kids receive in the school environment is not always a positive message. And I know many of us with kids with learning differences have experienced that. It can be so impactful on their self-esteem. If they're that kid that's kind of fidgety and wiggly and gets up a lot, all the things you're probably experiencing at home, when they're doing that in the classroom, it's often, Sarah, sit down. John, sit down. John, you got to stop doing that. Can you sit still? That's happening over and over again in front of their peers. And it just chips away at their self-esteem. Their attitudes, their beliefs, and their self-esteem can have significant impacts on their behavior and their achievement. So see this as the opportunity for us parents to shift that narrative for them. In the home, often one of the things I want to do is, if you're having issues with behavior at home, if there's outbursts, screaming, crying, frustration, I really want to focus us parents on building their sense of self-esteem, their self-confidence, and their self-worth. And remember, they are subject to a lot of criticism in the classroom, in the school environment. So they get very focused on the things they can't do well. So some things that I would do during this time for those kids: determine what is their area of strength or interest and bolster that, focus on that. What makes them feel really, really good? Always ensure that there's something beyond academics that is rewarding. So right now, what is that value for them in this time? What is the value going to be for them? What is going to make them feel good and a sense of achievement? Make sure the child knows that you value the things that they're good at. And this is our opportunity. I think you're doing such a good job on your schoolwork, and I'm just really proud of you. I know how hard this is for you, and I know how hard it is to learn on our own, but I'm really proud of you. That can be so powerful for these kids. Don't let homework and schoolwork overtake every minute, right? So if they're getting behind in school, what ways can we advocate for them? If the assignments are too much, how can we modify them? And for parents, this can be a real struggle. So again, this is where you reach out to either, if the child has a 504 plan, reaching out to whoever manages the 504 plan, or reaching out to individual teachers where the child's actually struggling, or reaching out to their special education teacher. How can we modify this because he's getting really overwhelmed? There's a lot of resources online too. So if you're struggling with modifying, a math assignment, maybe go to every other problem instead of every problem. Ask the teacher if that's okay. He's really struggling with 35 math problems on his homework assignment. Don't control screens again right now. I think that's something we get in the habit of doing. Help them maintain their school friendships. This is another really challenging part of it. How can they do that? Is it regular Zoom calls, FaceTime calls, whatever it might be? How can we create space for that? Again, a lot of boys are communicating on, boys are communicating on video games. Another thing they've been doing a lot of is going on bike rides. Biking here in California is big, so that's something they've been able to do together. Go mountain biking, because there's definitely social distance happening, but at least they can feel a sense of social connection. Maintaining sleep and routine. And I think this is really hard because I think all of us are feeling kind of off in our schedules. I know personally that I'm having a hard time falling asleep before 11 and having a hard time getting up, in the morning before 7 a.m. And normally I'm used to getting up at 5 a.m. and working. So I think everyone's feeling tired, a little groggy. So how can we maintain some of that routine? Having them get up, brush their teeth, make their bed. I always tell kids, making your bed is the first accomplishment of the day. And it feels really good to have those. If you have a restless child, how can you create space for morning activity? So can you go on a walk? Can you guys, sometimes my kids like to get on the Peloton for 20 minutes. Skateboarding in the morning for my son, or going on a little run or a bike ride, whatever it is. How can we get some of that energy out in the morning and get them started in a positive way? Maybe movement or PE is the first thing they do every day. Healthy foods. I think right now we're all talking about how much everybody is, eating and snacking and all of this, but just making sure there's always healthy foods available. I've been cutting up vegetables and fruit and having that accessible. I have a little snack box where they can grab a healthy granola bar. I'm really trying to focus on maintaining healthy meals during the day because it's so easy right now to kind of get caught in that cycle of eating unhealthy. Upending their regular routine can be particularly difficult for kids with learning differences or attention issues. So teachers and families should definitely be working together to create home learning activities that resemble the school day. Creating those moments, those touch points for them. Emphasize structure, create a daily list of activities, break into small chunks with plenty of breaks. Follow a similar order to what they do during the day. Maybe math needs to be done first thing in the morning. Maybe writing has to be done first thing in the morning. What does your child need? Individualize it. My basic advice to you as parents is to manage your expectations. We are in a very particular moment right now, but social emotional health is absolutely, hands down, the most important thing. Students should focus on their habits, not on their grades. So they should be more focused on how can I improve my habits as a student? And the ability to do those habits has changed. The most important is, remember, socialize them, help them with their regulation, their self-regulation, and also their safety. So with that, I turn it back over to Kim.
Thank you so much, Ryan. That was really awesome. I always learn a lot when I hear you discuss these topics, so thank you. I do have a question, and you spoke to this when you talked about sort of the leniency and screen time right now. But we have a parent who asks, what are the best tools to make sure that your kids aren't goofing off online when they tell you they're working on the
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very, very difficult. And it depends, I guess, on what the goofing off looks like. So one of the things we've had issues with, and hopefully my daughter can't hear me, is they have these iMovies that they make, and the teachers allow it as like a platform, like creativity. But she'll like look on her school iPad like she's doing work, and really she's been scrolling through and watching all the new movies they've been posting. And so for, maybe an hour, it's like she's scrolling through these videos endlessly. And I had no idea. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, so what did you finish today? Because I thought, she's so autonomous. So one of the things this is where the communication piece comes in, and it can be really difficult depending on the child, but just like, here's the deal. You could finish all your schoolwork today and not have any school tomorrow, because she gets all her assignments on Mondays. So what's your goal? What do you want to do? Tell me what your goals are. Because if your goals are to not finish school this year, and I would also, by the way, limit how much information we're providing to kids about how accountable they are to the work. I want kids to believe that they're fully accountable to all of this. And it's, I want them to know that, you just have to do your best. If you do your best, then you'll go move on to the next grade. If you don't, then we're going to have problems. You can do web blockers like RPACT. So you can, Verizon has a complete monitoring system, so you can monitor everything your kids are doing. There is kind of and there's various apps you can put on the computer and web blockers so that you can manage what they're actually looking at. Or on Macs, you can use parental controls so that, look, YouTube, for instance. On the school screen, we had to block YouTube because it would pop up, and then, one of my kids would get lost in watching YouTube videos. So we had to block that. So creating kind of web blockers and letting them know, like, use what we call in the therapy world motivational interviewing. So how is having access to YouTube during the school day, how's it helping you to get your schoolwork done? And then, but how's it hindering you? Like what's getting in the way from you getting your schoolwork done? What are the different things you get distracted by? And then the kids will usually answer. And then you can say, well, there are some ways that, what are some ways that we could support you with this? What are some ways that we could manage this? This is the same conversation I had to have with my child, because they get lost in, and if they've got an open platform where they can see what other kids are posting, they're getting lost in all of that. It almost becomes like its own social media. So I would create the school screen and the school screen and the computer screen, or the school screen and the social screen, so that the school screen has blocks on it and they can't do anything else. And then again, we always talk about this as teachers, proximity. So if your child's like learning space is in their bedroom, it's really great if their learning space is set up so that their back is to the wall. I know that, or the door, it's not feng shui, but it's, you can then see their screen by just walking by and kind of see, what are they doing over there? What are they into? So they're not feeling like you're micromanaging them. Or if they're in an open area like this, I'll often just walk by, just pass through and just take a look at the computer screen. And if they look like they're off task, I might walk over and be like, hey, so what are you working on right now? Is there any way that I can support you? So those are different strategies that you can use. The phones can be like the biggest distraction. So putting on do not disturb, so they're not getting notifications during the academic time. If their academic times are 30 minutes or 45 minutes, just making sure that they're, that during those times, put on do not disturb on your phone, or do you need me to take your phone so you're not distracted by it? Like, what can we do to support you?
Thank you. We have a couple more questions coming in now. We have a parent that asks, my son has pretty much broken his social relationship with almost all of his friends. Mm-hmm. The few that are left are the ones we do not particularly like. Mm-hmm. How can I support him to make more and more positive friends? It's usually already difficult, but now even more so.
Okay. So yes, that's really challenging. And I'd say that the boys actually are having a harder time with this part of it because it's not natural for them to, talk on the phone and do FaceTime calls. So often my fear is, there's this saying, I can't remember where it came from, and is show me your friends and I'll show you you. That to me is telling me that he's not feeling great inside and he's struggling. But he might not understand that and he might not see that. So it depends on how old your child is. So if we're talking, 6th to 9th grade, you have a little bit more control and can kind of step in a little bit more. And then if you're talking an older child, it's going to be a lot harder to do that. I would say right now that any social connection is better than no social connection. It's hard right now for there to, unless your child's leaving the house, which by the way, there are kids that are still not following social distance rules. So I don't know what's happening in terms of that. But I would encourage them to set up a Zoom call, or you can set up the Zoom call, or we did a Zoom movie night where we shared our movie screen and had a bunch of kids on there. We did a virtual bingo night where we brought a bunch of kids in, high school kids in, and did a whole virtual bingo game night that we facilitated. And so, there's different ways for you to access that and get that touch point without him recognizing that you're doing it. Again, it depends on age, but those are just some different suggestions I have.
Awesome, thank you. Here's another question. So they were also touching on what you were just speaking about. What if they're not having any social contact and no friends reaching out? And I think you spoke to that a bit. Also, do you have any recommendations to help the kids get active?
Yeah, so let me go back really. One thing I want to add to the friends, and then I'll talk about the getting active, is this is an opportunity for us to strengthen our connection to them. So if they are not talking to their friends and their peers, which is happening, I mean, it's hard. It's a lot of effort to maintain those relationships right now. And they really rely on the face-to-face interaction. Increase the family connection. That's what I would focus on, is how can we increase our connection as a family? Because really at the end of the day, this is what matters, is us. So although social part is important, I think if we can improve our interactions and our FaceTime and our connection as a family movie nights, going on family walks, whatever that looks like for the family, I think that's really the key. So I think I want to just add that there and leave that for those kids that are struggling socially, is really focus on how you guys connect as a family right now. Because this is really what this is offering us, is that time. The getting active. So this is so important. So it depends on weather, of course, and everybody's weather has been a little bit different. Of course, we're not quite out of the woods with winter weather coming in. But we've been doing activity. I'm happy if they get 20 minutes of activity a day. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. We have a trampoline, and I don't care what age you are. If you have a big trampoline, you guys can all get on there and have fun. We've been doing a ton of, the Peloton app is free for 90 days. It's got yoga, it's got beginners yoga, so super easy. And sometimes it takes us parents getting involved in doing it with them, especially with the younger kids who are the idea of exercising. Normally they're getting their exercise on the yard, but how can we create that time and maybe do it with them? Again, when I talk about is focus on that family connection. How can we kind of reconnect with our kids in a way we haven't been able to in a while? Because there's always, all of us are being pulled in so many directions. The family walks, I love. The family walks, family bike rides. Again, if your child likes skateboarding, there's absolutely no reason why they can't go skateboarding. Trying new things too. Can you guys go on a 20-minute run together? Doing it together is always going to be, usually is going to be more successful than just telling them to go do something. The Peloton app, I got started on that, and my daughter's been doing the yoga and has really liked it. So there's so much exercise out there for free right now. I mean, I know that Peloton's just one of them, but everyone's offering their exercise for free. So how can we get on there as a family and do something? Littler kids, there's tons of YouTube videos. I forget some of the names, but there's definitely YouTube exercise that are like 10 minutes long, just getting them some jumping jacks and some, sit-ups and push-ups, just getting them moving their bodies.
Excellent, thank you. We have a couple more and then we'll wrap up. These are kind of going back to maybe some recommendations with academics. So we have one parent, my son struggles with all of his academics. When I try to help, he fights more. Mm-hmm. He misses the teacher/assistant interaction and does much more with their help. He avoids school as much as possible as he feels so overwhelmed. Do you have any strategies or advice?
So I'm curious if this child has an IEP, but whether or not there's an IEP or not, I would be reaching out to the school immediately. Honestly, there is no school right now that's going to hold, these kids are just not being held accountable to the work. And I know that as parents, we are in desperate need of having them engage and create structure. But again, I go back to, I think the most important thing right now is focusing on the family unit. And I'm sure that this is part of another webinar we had this morning with our chief clinical officer, but really focusing on how can we strengthen that right now. So those power struggles are not going to help the situation, especially when, all we have is each other right now, our families, our kids, our, spouses or partners. So my suggestion would be to reach out to the school and ask how we can minimize and prioritize the work. 2 is there a way to set up a daily touch point with a favorite teacher, or if there's a special education teacher or an instructional aide they really like, the aides are all still getting paid. So there's definitely opportunities for that. Is there a way to create a touch point for that child every day? And maybe that person helps them set up their goals. Like I said in the beginning, when I mentioned the helpers for the family, us as parents are not, this is often why we hire tutors. It's not because we can't help them. It's because the way they interact with us and the way they receive the guidance and help is not the same. So it often results in a power struggle. So who are people outside of the family that you can reach out to? I would first think about the school, anyone at the school that you can reach out to create a daily touch point with the child. And that would maybe the emotional connection that these kids have to their teachers is so important right now. And they're missing that. My daughter didn't want to get on her class Zoom today. She's just like, the class Zooms are overwhelming. There's so many people. And I'm like, but it's about the connection to your teacher. That's the goal right now, is just to create that connection to your teacher and your classroom. So how can you do that? Or is there someone outside the family that can help, would be willing to meet with your child, maybe weekly or daily, just to set up goals and check-ins and say, so what do you have to do today? The great thing about Zoom is sharing your screen. Here's the list of things I've got. I don't even know where to start. And someone can help navigate that. That's not the immediate parent. Is it a cousin in college? Is it, an uncle, an aunt? Is it a really close family friend that the child feels, but this should be someone they feel really comfortable with. Those would be my 2 suggestions. And I would say, if the child needs help and is getting stumped and he's not unwilling to reach out to the teacher for help, I have no problem with parents sort of kind of circumventing and emailing the teacher and saying, he doesn't want to reach out for help, but can you just email and check in, not mention I said anything, and just see if he can use any support right now. I just really feel like we have to help promote this. It's because some of the kids are shutting down for sure and feeling very emotionally disconnected right now. Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we can maybe sneak one more question in, and then Kristen can wrap it up. Do you have any recommendations for online tutoring now that we are sort of on online schools?
Oh yeah, online tutor. There's some really great ones. We've used Varsity tutoring has been a great one, and that is another option if you know you can afford it, and checking in and getting like a virtual tutor who checks in with the client, the student, maybe daily, and sets their schedule up for them. Again, I said this is very difficult for parents to do, so whatever you can do to create that opportunity for them. Sometimes that brain dump at the beginning of the day where I want them to organize all their work, you know, their must-dos, their want-to-dos, and their not time-sensitive items. How can I how can I create space for them to get that done with somebody that's not me? So Varsity Tutors is one program that we've used before that's been really successful. And then there's also, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ones, but I'm sure they're quite popular right now for sure. But I do think, or if your child had a tutor before as well, make sure that they're still seeing that person. They're getting that touch point. Again, it's those things that these kids are missing.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I know I personally really appreciate all the insight and information. And I also appreciate the fact that you pointed out, you know, as parents, sometimes, especially working from home and juggling job and now homeschool and cook, and in my house, it's geometry and chemistry teaching. It's really difficult. And I think we need to recognize that, you know, we can cut ourselves some slack and keep focused on helping our kids improve their study skills and their study habits at home. And that's one thing we can reinforce, making sure they're active and connected. So I really appreciate your input, and I'm sure everybody else on the call does as well.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. For everyone who's attending, thank you all so much. We really do appreciate being a resource for you all. Please join us for our next Parent University. It's Redefining the Families, Strengthening the Connection Beyond the Crisis, where Dr. Barbara Nosell, who's our Chief Clinical Officer, will discuss family connections and how to put the fun back in family, and hopefully creating some connections that will last long beyond the immediate crisis at hand. That'll be May 7th at noon Pacific Standard Time, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And if you guys have any questions or need any more resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to Newport Academy at our website, www.newportacademy.com. Thank you all so much.